Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes on climate change. And most important thing is that like already around the world, everybody discuss on climate change as well as many countries taking initiative on climate change. And we are trying to educate peoples based on the climate change activities, based on sustainabilities and other things. I think so everybody knows about today's our speakers, Dr. William, Mr. Cart, Mr. Pauls, and Mr. Alex. So I want to start with Mr. Alex. How do you want to introduce about this climate change and what the new things you want to share with our audience?
Yes, hello, Sharif. Good morning, everyone. So here we are again, discussing another important topic, and I know there's a lot of issues around the world. I mean, people talk about equality. There's racism, sexism. There's the LGBTQ situation. There's all kinds of issues going on in the world with obviously pollution and workplace discrimination, and there's just so many issues that like people stand for and they protest against and they try to solve through activism or voting with your money or voting politically and all these different things. So of course those are all really, really important. And I don't discourage anyone from participating in any of that. But if we don't solve climate change, like nothing else is going to matter. And that's what activists, climate activists, climatologists, scientists have been trying to get across for so long, that climate change is like the #1 issue. And coincidentally, to solve climate change, it's like we have to solve all of these other issues throughout our society for our society to function correctly. Right now, our society is out of balance. Obviously, we're extracting resources beyond their capabilities to recharge. We're destroying Earth's biosphere. We're interfering or disrupting Earth's natural ecosystems that we're all dependent on. So we're causing a lot of impact. So to solve that, obviously we have to lower our individual carbon footprint, and environmental impact of companies and corporations and all of that. Another thing that we have to do is somehow figure out ways to restore the damage that we've already caused, because we've caused a lot of damage in Earth's biosphere. And then another thing that we desperately have to do is we have to store carbon. We have to find more ways to store carbon, but there's not like the best option. It's not just planting trees and composting or lessening our dependence on fossil fuel derived chemicals and synthetic fertilizers, so we stop killing the soil. That helps with carbon sequestration. There's so many things that we have to do, because anytime dying organic matter decays, it releases carbon up into the atmosphere. So there's we have all the solutions. These discussions, we list so many solutions. It's not one solution, it's not another. So our goal with this with these discussions are try to educate everyone, more people, because there's just so many solutions. We have them, we discuss them. Paul Beckwith is on the show today. He studies climatology. Today's topic's on climate change. Just want to summarize. So there's we have the solutions, we know how to solve it. There's going to be massive humanitarian issues around the world because of climate change. We're going to see stronger blizzards, more rain, more flooding, more drought, more desertification. We're going to see a lot of superstorms, increase in wildfires, all of these disasters, which are going to cause people to move into new regions, which has the potential to cause more war and conflicts and disruptions in those regions with borders. And we have a lot of stuff to do, to work on in a short amount of time. These discussions are important. Please share Sharif's videos. Talk about climate change. Don't share misinformation, and comment in the section if you have any questions. Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Alex. Mr. Paul, how do you want to introduce this climate change issues? And still, we are observing that different developing nations, country, as well as USA government also taking a lot of initiative. They are already start negotiation on that particular point. But what area we should focus right now? Climate change is a big issue. What area we should give priority?
um, I mean, any of us could go and talk for hours about the issues, right? But basically, the we know that the Earth is warming at an ever accelerating rate, and we also know that the warming is unevenly distributed across the planet. So higher latitude regions are warming much faster than lower latitude regions. So specifically, the Arctic region, and if you include the entire Arctic, it's warming, at least three to five times faster than the global temperature average. So that's reducing the temperature difference to the equator, and that's disrupting the jet streams which circle the planet. And the jet streams act as a kind of a wall or barrier between cold, dry Arctic air and warm, humid, more southerly air. So as these jet streams become wavier in the north-south direction, you get heat going right up into the Arctic. In fact, some of these ridges, so-called ridges of the jet stream, head right to the North Pole in the middle of the winter, the Arctic winter, when it's completely dark, bringing the temperature above zero, right at the North Pole, in the dead middle of winter. Meanwhile, some of the troughs of the jet stream, the extend so far south that they will actually even cross the equator. The jet stream can meet up and cross the equator and join with southern hemisphere jet streams. So all of these imbalances are causing a huge increase in extreme weather events around the planet. So they're happening a lot more often than they used to happen. So a 1 in 1,000 year event might be every 5 years or something. Now, like the statistics of the weather in terms of periodicity of things occurring, 1 in 100 years, 1 in 1,000 years, those numbers aren't really valid because we're not in a stable climate anymore. The severity of these extreme weather events is increasing, massive droughts in some places, massive rainfall in others, causing huge flooding. And these events are also, extreme weather events are also occurring in regions where they never occurred before. So the biggest factor in the near term is that we're going to have huge challenges in providing enough food around the planet because we're getting multiple crop failures in different places. So there's no buffering. Normally if there's a local drought or crop failure in one country, that country can just import lots of food from other countries. But we're seeing lots of multiple sort of failures simultaneously in different crops around the planet. So this will cause a great spike in food prices and disruption. So the water cycle has changed completely, the hydrological cycle. So we're in a period of abrupt climate change. So the climate is changing much faster now than the events that are forcing it. So the risk is that it eventually be taken out of our ability to do much on it. So we have to look at all possible solutions and look at the ones that we can scale up to have a planetary impact. And I'm talking about things like solar radiation management and carbon dioxide removal that I think are necessary, as well as slashing fossil fuel emissions. But the global ability to deal with this problem is it's not, we're just not ready for, we won't be able to we don't have the resilience to handle the problems that are coming down the pipe. And I think this last year with the coronavirus and its impact, it's sort of like a microcosm of what we'll see when we get sort of global food shortages from abrupt climate change. And I think, the biggest near-term effect on the climate will be the complete loss of Arctic sea ice in summers. And then the Arctic warming will accelerate even more than anything we've seen.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask questions to Mr. Cart, like, how do you want to introduce these climate change issues? Beside that, like, what type of challenges we have right now, and how we can solve these things? What your idea and you want to share with our audience?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank Alex and Paul for um, explaining the problem so thoroughly. I really believe in a diversity of tactics. Um, all of us working, there's just, The environmental movement is huge right now. So if you're kind of on the sidelines, wondering how to get in, um, there's just so many ways to get in. And we have a lot of people focusing on government policy, and that's great, and we should all be doing that. I have a tendency to kind of get onto some smaller projects, just because they help get people's foot into the door. And Paul was just talking about food crop shortages, and we grow enough food to feed 11 billion people on this planet, but we take half that food and we feed it to animals so that we can eat animals. So one of the biggest things that a person can do is to try to reduce the intake of animal products. Um, in the chat, I posted a video. Um, I am not a vegan. I do respect vegans. I do respect um, their belief that animals should be treated better, but I don't share in their belief that it's wrong to eat animals. That humans are omnivores, and that's our natural thing. We eat plants and animals, but we can survive and thrive really on a plant-based diet. So in my environmental advocacy, I've tried to collaborate with different vegans. And the video I posted is of a vegan who um, talks about how to get people to actually change their behavior. And in doing that, he actually uses research from the environmental movement, and it's just amazing. This video, it really changed my advocacy. It helped me to get started on smaller projects. Not all of us can go out and buy an electric vehicle. Not all of us can go out and buy a solar panel system, or um, pay several $1,000s to make our home more efficient, to buy more efficient appliances. Some of us just aren't there, but we can all definitely start by eating less meat, and by getting others to eat less meat. And that's just a really good way to get your foot in the door to begin some environmental advocacy. So what I've been doing is I write for a website called Clean Technica, and I just can't believe I've written many drafts, but I'm going to be writing a whole series of articles um, on this video, and talking about getting people started on smaller, simpler things. I'm sorry, the other panelist is a green actioneer, and he does a really good job of that as well. This is how you can get started on some small things. So if anyone's out there, I put this video in the chat section, and also my email address. So I'm actually looking for people who want to collaborate, who want to actually have their words, posted. We can kind of collaborate and work on the articles together. I find that collaboration just brings out so many better thoughts. Alex and I have done a lot together, and that has really taken my environmental advocacy to the next level. It's just, I don't know about other people, but I work better in groups. So I'm looking for some people who would um, like to see their words printed on the internet and read by thousands of people. So contact me if you're interested.
Mhm. Thank you, Dr. William. How do you want to introduce this climate change, and how you want to introduce specifically the policy on climate change?
Well, actually, I'm here just as a bit of a difference to say that finally we have some good news, and that is with the Biden administration. In all prior programs prior to the election, we were talking about the what ifs, what could be, what may happen, and it's always been this outside dream of the environmental movement to say, hey, listen, one day we just need a big shock to the system if the world would change or if the world would wake up. Well, I'm happy to say simply this, that as most of you know, and if you don't know, you'll know right now, that current President Biden signed a series of executive orders directly dealing with climate activities yesterday here in the United States. So it'd be yesterday, it might be 2 days ago for some around the world. And the significance of it, obviously there's some that are just low-hanging fruit. The suspending or the stopping of new oil and gas drilling areas in the United States. There are reviews of other things. One of the other things he did was he stopped, he rescinded the permit to build the XL pipeline. And then on top of that, he generally said that environmental issues were to be important. Rejoined the Paris Peace Accord, or at least is in the process. Appointed former Secretary of State John Kerry as the special envoy for climate change to be our essentially envoy czar for climate change around the world. But then here is the significant stuff that I'm really, really happy about. All the other stuff is great and it's low-hanging fruit, and it's one of these things. But this is a shout out to you, Alex, and I want to kind of go through it again because you mentioned it and you've been a consistent proponent of it, and you're right, which is to say voting with your dollars. Now, for today's show, I specifically wanted to make a highlight of one executive order that President Biden signed yesterday that is now implemented. That executive order says that the United States government will use all of its purchasing power, that is all of the money it spends, in ways that will reduce our carbon footprint and become environmentally friendly. And that's everything that they purchase. Now, just to kind of, that says, okay, well, great, fine, they're doing that. But let me measure the impact for you. And I did this today, and I just want to take a moment and show the audience. Each year, the federal government spends about $4.4 trillion. That's what the federal government spends, just in terms of their money and the activity and everything else, buying computers, cars, you name it, everything that the government needs to function. Now, that represents 21% of the United States economy. Now, the United States economy is $23 trillion, but let's just take a moment and look at the $4.4 trillion that just the government spends here in the United States. You turn around, and if we go down, if we could just kind of go down the screen, that 4.4 trillion is more than the gross domestic product of the entire country of Germany. It's more than the gross domestic product of India, more than the gross domestic product of Italy, Brazil, the United Kingdom, France, Canada. Those are the next 7 nations. That's their entire economy. That is to say that the entire nation of Italy, the entire nation of Germany took their entire economy and just switched its priorities and goals. That's what this 4.4 trillion is larger than all of those. Now, here's the point. The point is that is each year. And what that does at the end of the day, what we know from that one executive order is that he has now committed $17.6 trillion to the global effort in climate change and environmental resources. Now, the import of that is simply this. Now, the United States government, in all of its purchases, that $4.4 trillion every year into renewable energies, climate control things, studies, you name it, products, services, everything from top to bottom, $4.4 trillion. Now, that for me is voting with your money. And now the United States American government has said, hey, 1, we're going to rejoin the Paris Peace Accords. 2, we're going to try to deal with Iran and the nuclear issues. 3, we're appointing a special czar to go around the world and not only restore all of our prior agreements, but strengthen them. And with that, through the call for the summit on Earth Day and at the Glasgow summit, bringing all the nations together to see about how we're going to do this. And then on top of that bet, laid on the table, the United States government from President Biden has laid $4.4 trillion, which is 21% of the United States gross domestic product. Now, I don't know what kind of stronger statement the American people can make. I don't know what kind of stronger statement the United States government can make in saying this is how we're doing it. And he is single-handedly redirecting $4.4 trillion. That's 20% of the United States economy. That is a serious marker. That is something that says that we're serious about it. So now the world knows that there are $4.4 trillion each year. There are 330 million Americans in the world who are now behind the entire environmental movement. And that has got to be good news. So what we can see is we see this cascading thing, first with the oil leases, then with the summit, then with the special envoy, then with the Paris Peace Accords. Then we have the $4.4 trillion. And then on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, because this is unheard of, he then turned around and signed an executive order that said, hey, listen, we're going to move from what we currently have protected federally in terms of our forests and waterways and ocean parks and such. We're going to add another 30% over the next four years of land and territory that the United States controls as a conservation area. So that's taking 30% more of the land that's out there that's currently exposed to the dangers of environmental destruction and perhaps leading to climate change, like the destruction of the barrier reefs and such. That's taking that off the table. So I don't know. We have waited and we have waited and we have waited ever since the first Earth Day summit or Earth Day back in the 1970s. Say, when will be the day? When will we have that moment? When will everybody finally, in today's vernacular words, be woke? And I'm saying to you, $4.4 trillion says we're woke. And it's voting with your dollars. And so, Alex, you should be proud today because the United States government here's really doing what you're doing. Now, as to other issues about people saying, and the schools have thought that say, oh, it's a bit too late. Or, well, we're not quite sure. Or, well, it doesn't look good. You're right. All of that stuff is true if we look at it right now and we look retrospectively. Cannot argue. Cannot dispute. It is absolutely clear. If nothing is done, and as we stand right now, that school of thought is correct. However, the question becomes, and it's always been, the what if we do change? And that game is no longer a what if. It's a here and now, and that's what we're doing. So now is the most exciting time to be involved in any way, shape, or form, big, small, whatever it is, in the environmental movement. And this is also a big day for business because with $4.4 trillion looking for energy efficient and climate and environmentally safe ways, and that market is out there, and the federal government's going to be buying, and they're going to be buying every single year, 4.4 each year, 17.6 over 4 years. You, as a business person, now have the incentive because if you create a better product that replaces something that's environmentally damaging, you got a customer. You have a customer for life. So for those people who are on the business side of being ecologically friendly and developing an ecosystem, get at it. This is, before in a prior show, we talked about, some of these issues, and I had said somewhat, over enthusiastically, that now is the time and all hands on deck. All ideas on the table. Whatever you got, let's come to the table and just put it on. No idea, big, small, ridiculous or not, put it all on the table. Well, I'm telling you that President Biden just said, okay, I've got $4.4 trillion. Now, if I was in a pool hall and I was trying to hustle people and some guy came in and said, I've got a check for $4.4 trillion, I think I'd bring my best pool game. So right now, for the environmental world and the environmental movement and the rest of the world, I think Joe Biden just walked into the pool hall, put down $4.4 trillion, and said, let's see what we can do with this. And that's just this year. We're going to do it this year, next year, the year after, and the year after. So I'm just excited. I'm just excited. And the only thing I'm telling the people who say, oh, yeah, well, it's bad, and I understand that, and you're right, that's wrong. But right now, I just say $4.4 trillion. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know something's going to happen. Dr. Sharif?
Thank you, Dr. William. Professor Dev, after the excellent explanation from Dr. William, what do you want to add for today's session?
Well, I'm in the pool hall. I am playing a game because that's the way I operate. I do not talk about the downside. I've known about the downside since January 2007 when I got trained by Al Gore and I got shown his dismal slideshow, and then I was going to go out and do things for elementary school. Excuse me, I have to turn this thing off. I was going to go out and talk to elementary school children and their teachers about climate change, and I realized that all the information that was out there was dismal and scary. So I started looking at the things that weren't dismal and scary, not at the problem, because everybody knows the problem now, and everybody knew the problem back then, even if they didn't admit it. But I was looking for solutions. And so luckily, there are solutions out there. If you go to drawdown.org, it's neatly organized in 9 categories. You've got electricity, you've got food and agriculture and land use, you've got industry, transportation, you've got buildings, health and education, you've got land sinks and coastal and ocean sinks that can hold carbon. And then we can engineer our own sinks to hold carbon. So all of that exists. And so what I did was I said, okay, that exists, but what doesn't exist is the will to do it. And the way that we have always changed in the past has been by getting schools and education and parents and teachers to work on things, and then it permeates the society. And that's how society changes. It doesn't change only because, and I'm so appreciative of this, the president finally wakes up, the political party in charge finally wakes up and takes action. That's just the icing on the cake. The cake is what we all do. And so my work has been with kids and teachers in schools. And we, with a lot of effort, have come up with the Green Actioneers workbook. Now, this book isn't the be all and end all, but it does light a spark. And that spark has got to go throughout the educational system in this country and in other countries as well. It's a model, and I hope other people copy it. It's greenactioneers.com if anybody wants to get in touch with me. And I'm Dave Finnegan at greenactioneers.com. The book is telling about 100 different things that families can do, but it's a coloring book for the little kids. It's a word game for the older kids. And then it has a description in English and in Spanish. Now, wouldn't this be great if a book like this were available in every country? If there were a book that were written in Urdu and Hindi, or a book that was written in German and French, and every family could get on board, because then once every family is on board, those families work somewhere. People say to me, that's not enough. Working with kids, that's ridiculous. Working with kids, it's too late. It's too late to plant a tree. You should have planted that tree 20 years ago. That's the best time to plant the tree. I can't go back 20 years and plant that tree. The best time to plant the tree is now. And the same thing is true with climate change. The only time we can work on it is now. So what we're doing is going step by step through what a family can do, just as Project Drawdown went step by step through what a society can do. And we're trying to get people on board with solutions, not with the problem. People don't act out of fear, they act out of hope. And if we don't give them hope, then we're letting them down. And up until now, the entire climate movement has been about be afraid, be very afraid. And what we want to say is be hopeful, be very hopeful. We don't say, here's how bad it's going to be when we do everything wrong. We say, here's how great it's going to be when we do everything right. And so let's do everything right. Let's get to work on this at the only level we can work on, which is ourselves and our next door neighbors and our communities and our cities and our states and our countries. It always works that way. If somebody had come along and said, okay, you're all going to do rock and roll music in the 1950s. They said, okay, some government agency said, okay, you're all going to do rock and roll music. It's going to permeate the society. Everybody's going to listen to Elvis. Nobody would have listened to him. It started at the bottom and it came up and up and up. And pretty soon the government couldn't even put a lid on it. They couldn't stop it. And I guarantee you they tried. There were people at the top in the government who hated the permeation of our culture with rock and roll music, and they tried to suppress it, and it didn't work because it was coming from the bottom up. And it's only when these things come from the bottom up that they can happen. So wherever we are in the world, it is our obligation to work on ourselves and our families, to do the little things, change from the old incandescent light bulb to the LED. I know it doesn't mean much. It means a hell of a lot. The reason it means so much is because everybody's going to do it. And change from driving a gasoline-powered car to an electric car. Never set foot in a gasoline-powered car again. Only get in an electric car. And if somebody doesn't have an electric car, say, why don't you have an electric car? What's wrong with you? Why are you buying that gas hog? I can't believe that in this country they're still advertising gasoline-powered cars. They shouldn't even do that. So it's up to us as consumers to demand what we want. The reason that now they're talking about electric cars all over the United States is because of consumer demand, not because of some decision that was made at the government level. So we are the consumers and we must demand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Alex, my questions to you as well as all of the panelists. Can you please analyze what are the major causes for climate change and what type of initiative actually help us to solve this problem? Mr. Alex.
Yes, thank you, Sharif. So the major the major issues of climate change are we're destroying Earth's biosphere. There's like systems, and we can call them systems, we can call them ecosystems. We've greatly disturbed those. That's one of the main reasons. Just interfering with it, just whether it's building roads and separating areas, whether it's spraying chemicals and killing a lot of insects, building cities, and all of this light pollution. We've done a lot of damage just with our environmental impact. So there's different ways to look at climate change. One way is from burning the fossil fuels and releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which traps sun rays and heat and all of that. That's one issue that's caused an amplified increase in global temperatures or atmospheric temperatures. But the other thing is just our environmental impact. It has been very drastic and very severe. So every time we litter or pollution or spray chemicals or cut down a tree or cut down plants or spray Roundup, all of these different things that we do disrupts ecosystems that work together. They're all interconnected around the world. So we have to live in harmony with all of these ecosystems because we're dependent on all these ecosystems, and like everything's connected, because even like ecosystems and the way that works has like strange and long correlations with weather cycles and patterns and everything, because again, everything's connected. What Biden's now doing, which needs to be done and is recommended and promoted and educated through environmental scientists and everything, is just having protected areas, because then it allows other areas that are not protected to become more resilient. So the more protected areas that we have, not just around the United States but around the world, is very important. It could be a desert that's holding on and saving certain species of animals. It could be a marsh or a forest. So they're just very important. So there's different ways to look at it. Again, there's us burning fossil fuels and greenhouse gases. Then there's a huge category of pollution, and then disruptions. So there's a lot of main categories which we need to work towards. And again, these discussions, we cover so many issues. There's just so many, but we also provide the solutions. And when we're doing climate science, climate discussions like this, that's another way to look at it. So sometimes we talk about problems, sometimes we talk about solutions, sometimes we talk about the cause of the problems or the impacts. And I know that's confusing for a lot of people because we kind of go back and forth, but just knowing all of that. I wanted to just say to, Dr. William, that's just extraordinary. Thank you so much for letting us know about what the government's doing. If you're deciding onto this video, please rewind it and watch what Dr. Williams said. That's just incredible. Again, that volume of money and how they're able to vote with their money, with that large amount of money, would make a huge difference in a short amount of time. And over, like you said, 4 years is going to make a huge impact. Even if another Republican or someone else comes into office and they start, changing everything around, that money was already spent. All of their environmental notepads and sticky notes and pencils and pens and everything is going to be switched over, which is just incredible. And setting an example, supporting more green companies, that then gives them a bigger budget to get into more countries and have more advertisement money, and all of that's important. So since I'm super early. Sorry, Kurt. Since Kurt's on the show today, he might not know that Biden is also doing something huge. Kurt knows a lot about electric vehicles. As far as I know, from what I remember, it's Biden is replacing the whole, or trying to, or he's working on it, replacing all of the federal vehicles in the United States with electric. I don't know by when, but that's 647,000 vehicles they're switching from fossil fuel driven vehicles, combustion engines, to electric vehicles. So that's just going to be huge. That's going to help not just Elon Musk and Tesla, but all of these other upcoming electric vehicle companies, and just direct more attention towards electric vehicles and the benefits. Real quick, since we're talking about electric vehicles, there's a lot of misinformation that's saying, oh, the batteries and recyclable, the mines, more environmental impact. There's been studies done, to the best of my knowledge, in my opinion, that they're much more efficient from beginning to end. And there's also the single point of solution where the electricity is generated and not all these multiple points of pollution with combustion engines that we can't capture everywhere. So electric cars are a huge solution. Biden's also doing something with recycling and plastic. I don't know what it is, but he's changing around how, like, we need to be recycling. In Europe, when I went to Europe a couple of years ago, 11 European countries, they all recycle, and they also have those machines. You pay a little bit more for the beverage, but then you're more likely to recycle it. You put it in that machine, you get your money, you go to the store and you spend it. So we need that in America. Like, why do we have the 5 cent or 10 cent on recyclables here? We need to be charging like 25 cents, 50 cents. We need people to know that costs money, and we need them to return it. So it goes back into the system, into a circular economy. So in case anyone didn't catch on to what Paul was saying, or I just wanted to emphasize, he was talking about jet streams. So the jet streams, in the Arctic region used to kind of be more straight or stabilized, and they would keep all of the hot air down lower and the cold air up higher in the Arctic region, in the northern Arctic region. So now those jet streams are not straight and consistent. They're all like wobbly and like confused. So that's why sometimes we have these blizzards, or that's why that one senator decided to hold the snowball. Look, there's a snowball. There's no global warming. No, there is global warming. Earth's atmosphere is increasing temperatures around the world, but when that jet stream's all confused and all over the place, it's kind of going up, and warm air is going up into the Arctic regions, and cold air is coming down, and it's kind of spiraling. It's doing a lot of scary things. So and Paul's welcome to correct me if I'm wrong or explain anything on that. But so everything's all messed up there, and things are getting out of control. But yeah, right now is still our time to try to solve these problems. And I just want to say, what we're going through is really scary. To me, it's really scary. The more knowledge I learn about how bad things are, it's scary. But like was just mentioned, we have to be hopeful. Like, we can't give up. We have way too much to lose. We have to be hopeful. We have a lot of work to do. So while we continue to see all these issues, climate disruptions, humanitarian crises around the world, we also have to just continue to work on the solutions like we're doing, and persevere, and continue to move forward with what we're working on. And that's what I'd like to add to this conversation.
Thank you. This is our website, actually, World Talent Economy Forums, Al Noor Academy, and Asia Research and Development Institute.
That looks nice.
Yes, we are working together. Our 3 organizations, actually, we are working together, and we are more focused on research, training and development, as well as much as possible. We are developing a lot of training and development issues. So I request all of our panelists, as well as our audience, hopefully you can get a lot of information and all of the content from World Talent Economy Forums. Already we passed 200 of episodes. So we are trying to develop the exclusive content with the help of the exclusive guest, people from around the world, 100 different countries, and 300 speakers already join in World Talent Economy Forum. So I directly want to ask Mr. Paul that how do you want to introduce the major issues of the climate change and how we can solve?
William's comments, because Yeah, I think it'll take people, a while to realize. I mean, I actually read the documents that just came out yesterday, and I filmed a few videos last night, and I included it. The main topic of my videos was the staggering loss of ice on the Earth. So we've lost um, 28 trillion tons of ice on the Earth, and that includes things like the sea ice volume reduction, both sea ice in the Arctic and Antarctic, on land glaciers, mountainous glaciers around the world, and of course Greenland and Antarctica. So staggering amounts of ice loss. About 58% of that ice loss is in the northern hemisphere. This is in the last 25 odd years that we've lost that amount of ice, 25, 30 years. 58% of the ice loss is in the northern hemisphere, but 42% is in the southern hemisphere. So the Antarctic is playing a huge role, because in the southern hemisphere there's not much land, right? It's mostly ocean. So Antarctic is playing an extraordinarily large role. It's most of that 42% in the southern hemisphere. We've the cause of the melting of the ice, the energy that goes into melting that amount of ice, is only about 3.2% of the total energy imbalance on the Earth. So the radiative forcing imbalance, because more energy is coming into the system than is leaving the Earth system, right? So, and often I've talked about the percentage of that energy that goes into heating the oceans, and that's over 90%. So if 3.2% is melting the ice and 92 or 93% is warming the oceans, it's only what's left over, right? It's only that 3, 4, 5% that's left over that's heating up the atmosphere, and you can see the effects of the heating of the atmosphere. A few weeks ago, I talked about the shifting baseline concept, the shifting baseline that is often done when we discuss global average temperatures. So if you look back at the original Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change work, when they talked about, and then scientists from that, basically, not scientists, but the politicians and policymakers said, okay, well, let's put a 2 degree Celsius guard band. We can't rise more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial. And then in Paris, and Caribbean, Pacific nation countries, Pacific Island countries, were saying 2's too much. We need 1.5, it would be the more proper number relative to pre-industrial. But now, the definition of pre-industrial seems to be 1880 to 1910, the average. So the turn of that century. So 1900 plus or minus, 10, 15 years, right? That average being the baseline. And this year, or in 2020, we exceeded that baseline by 1.25 degrees Celsius. But the previous talk, it's a subtle shift in the baseline. Pre-industrial was always defined as the year 1750, in the original climate reports, etc. And you need to add 0.3 Celsius, which is the difference between the year 1750 and the 1900 baseline. Okay, so when we talk about, compare apples to apples, compare what's happening now to what we originally were talking about, you need to add 0.3 to 1.25. So that's 1.55 degrees Celsius above the 1750 pre-industrial baseline. So, when you hear people saying, well, we can't keep it below 1.5, we're going to pass there in 10 years or 15 years, I argue that we've already passed that, and we're heading up to 2 degrees very, very rapidly. So, but we have to do what we can. I mean, we can't just throw up our hands and say this is an insolvable problem. So, we do not have anywhere. Think of all the resources that the governments around the world put into their military budgets. And I've always given this example that, I'd love to see Biden say, tell the U.S. military, let's go with the weapons that we have. Let's go with the arsenal that we have for a few years. We can defend ourselves. We can destroy other countries 1,000 times over, right, with the present arsenal. So let's use the expertise of scientists and engineers that work on military projects to figure out more efficient ways um, to transfer to a fossil fuel free society, to figure out and perhaps deploy solar radiation management technologies, even as simple as changing the reflectivity or albedo of surfaces on the Earth, and let's figure out ways to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and even break up methane in the atmosphere, and figure out how to get the nitrous oxide emissions down, and also to secure a global food supply. I mean, basically, the military exists to address threats from other countries, and they've established a capacity in the U.S. to, the most powerful military country by many, many times over, right? So, perhaps they could use a new project. And now, if Biden is saying that climate change is the largest threat facing humanity, it's the existential threat. Let's spend 4.4 billion per year and make sure that any money, this is on procurement, so money has to be spent on new computers and new stuff. That's money that is not earmarked. Maybe some of it will be earmarked to doing, I think, a couple of key points. I'll probably do some separate videos on what he's saying, because it is so significant, these executive orders. There has to be, there may be, but I'm saying there really should be a lot of that money, or some of that money needs to go into educating people. I mean, schools. The U.S. has the top schools in the world, Harvard. Some of the top universities, but it also has the very worst schools in the world. Think of the school system in some of the poorer states, and think of how much school teachers are paid in the U.S. And there's not an emphasis on it's just could be greatly improved. We need to educate the youth about climate change and other things. We need to put a lot more resources into schools, period, in the U.S. and also in many other countries. And that money, I have to look at the details of that money, like how much is geared to researching renewables, how much is geared to, say, removing CO2 from the atmosphere, techniques like that, as simple as planting more forests and not cutting down the existing forests. What can we do to, control wildfires that are breaking out of control in many, many states? I mean, surely we can use, satellite technology to spot the infrared signatures of fires when they're very, very small, and then use water bombers or whatever to suppress them before they get out of control and destroy infrastructure everywhere and so on. And this is a huge problem as we get more and more droughts in different places. The trees are stressed; they're very prone to burning. So, there's a lot of, the devil's always in the details. But Biden is definitely heading in the right direction, and there was a whole bunch of stuff in this executive order. But I think Dr. William has hit on the key points. The most significant thing of that is, follow the money. Where's the money going? And that 21% of the U.S. GDP, is enormous. So I have cautious optimism, because I had a lot of optimism when Obama became president. He spoke eloquently about all of the wonderful things, and in addressing climate change, but he was kind of hamstrung by the political system in the U.S. and a lot of the things, many other reasons. When you're president, you've got a lot of things on your plate, right? Often you're fighting fires and not be able to think sort of long term. Climate change is a long term problem, of course, and we need long term solutions. But another huge thing is we need to educate people. We need to educate adults. I mean, it's been almost like a cult-like situation of climate denial. We have an entire party, the Republicans, who are completely denying climate change. So we need, for any politician, we can have, they should have a bare minimum of knowledge, right? And that's not how the system works. Anybody with their crazy Canon ideas or QAnon or whatever, however you pronounce it, we have a politician who's a member of that organization and is already filed in the U.S. for impeachment proceedings against Biden, on day one. And this stuff is absolute lunacy, right? I mean, okay, so we have a free society, right? But we have to, the free and the ability to speak nonsense and lies and stuff is a huge downfall. I mean, freedom is great, but I don't think people should have freedom to 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 have a platform to have outright lies and mistruths and things and spread conspiracy theories. So we've got to kind of figure that out. Social media is the wild west, and we have to try to figure out what to do about that because and Biden's how can we cement some policies like if we need to get the Republicans on board about how climate change is an existential threat and get them to sign on to climate policies and things that will outlast any 4-year cycle of any president because it's just we're like a yo-yo, right? We have strong climate policy maybe for 3-4 years and then another government comes in and everything is chopped, and it's always dangerous because it takes a long time to build up capacity to do things, and you can destroy that capacity in a day, right? So to build up think tanks and action, have a climate envoy and enter agreements and take all this action on climate change, that takes a long time to build up and to get people on board. And yet another government can come along and chop everything and kill everything in a single day. So this is, we need to think about all of these things to really have some long-term, solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Cart.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to the 640,000 EVs that Biden has demanded the government to purchase. There's over 2 billion cars on the road, so you can look at that and say, God, that's not much, 640,000 out of 2 billion, but it's a very big deal because of early adoption. Every time you double the amount of batteries that are sold, the price goes down significantly. So those 640,000 cars that are going to be bought by the federal government are going to bring electric vehicles down in cost. If you own a battery-owned product, a cell phone, a laptop, you can see over the years how much better those devices have gotten while the price going down. I remember I had a cell phone and I had to replace the battery and it was like $100. And now if I want to buy a battery replacement for my phone, since I don't pay the huge amount for a brand name phone, I can get a battery for my phone for $5-6. And so that's been tremendous news. The power of early adoption cannot be overstated, and that's kind of why in the project that I had put on about getting people to eat less meat, it's so important that in that effort we increase the early adopters who are buying these plant-based meats that taste phenomenal. And I know several years ago I would have to go to the really trendy, expensive store to get the fake plant-based meats, and now they're available more at the basic stores, and that's going to come in. And I mean, if you could just go onto Google Earth and just look across the country or your country or any landmass on the planet, and you can just see how much of the natural ecosystems has become farmland. As I said, we grow enough food to feed 11 billion people. Well, what's going to happen if we can drastically decrease the amount of animals that are grazing on those fields, that are having corn and soy grown for them to feed them, and get rid of this massive animal agriculture that is just destroying the planet? There's so little left, and thankfully we can't do it perfectly, but we do have the people working on it to to bring back the natural ecosystems to farmland, that we're going to return back to natural carbon sinks where they're sequestering carbon. Um, the other thing, I'm kind of jumping over the place back between two categories, but going back to the 640,000 vehicles. Uh, so right now already, an electric car costs a little bit more than a gas car, but because you don't have oil changes and the cost of fuel for electricity compared to gasoline is so much cheaper. So right now we're at a point where while you are paying a little bit more for the electric car, the total cost of ownership is about the same. And now because of these early adopters, we're going to have the cost of electric cars come down, and then they're going to be equal to gasoline cars. And then by 2030, around that area, they'll actually be much cheaper. So we're going to be moving over the next 10 years to where wind, solar, electric vehicles, energy storage were more expensive to now they're more cheaper. So now is such a crucial time because it is the early adopter of those products that are going to drive the cost down. And once we've driven the cost down far enough, we won't need the level of government mandates. You know, if you had asked me 10 years ago, um, I said would have said civilization was going to collapse because solar and batteries, where it cost 90, were 10 times more expensive than they are now. Sorry, my numbers may be off. They were multiple times more expensive than they are now. But that price has come way down because of early adopters. So there's so much that we can do. I'm going to go ahead and save some time for the other panelists because I'm kind of jumping around between two topics. But thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. William.
Well, I'm excited. I changed my board, 4.4 trillion, just right over here over my shoulder. What I do want to pick up is I want to pick up on some of the and echo some of the observations that Alex made and also that Kurt made. First, I want to deal with Kurt and Alex with regard to 648,000 electric vehicles. That is not only significant because if you think that the government churns over its fleet of vehicles every 2 to 3 years, about 36 months. You figure that that's 650,000 vehicles every 36 months. And what they do with their surplus vehicles is they sell them to car dealerships. They sell them to places that rent cars. They sell them on the secondary market in lots. But so that the government will be absorbing the initial cost that Kurt talked about for the early adopters. So that marginal increase currently right now, that's the premium cost for the early adopters, which we expect to see over time when it becomes more efficient in mass production, to disappear or evaporate because it comes down based on the number of units. That's going to be absorbed by the federal government. That's going to be absorbed every 36 months. So that by the time before the Biden administration is done, you will essentially have 650,000 vehicles currently purchased, and then you will have them roll over into the private sector in the secondary market, and a new 650,000. That, when you look at that, that's 1 point some odd million. 1.2, 1.25, or whatever it is. I'm not really good with the numbers. That's why, I'm a lawyer. You don't care about numbers. But the point here being that with the early adoption, and one, that's significant. The government's going to be absorbing that cost, at least initially, and then you're going to see a consistent flow of these vehicles. And the one thing that both Kurt and Alex spoke of, and that is simply this. And it's something that we know, at least from, and I'm not mixing metaphors here, but it's something that was true from the civil rights movement. And that is to say that it's one thing to protest out on the streets for change. It's another thing to institutionalize that change. That is to say that when you achieve your goal, then you make it a policy. And then once it's a policy, if you can make it a law, make it a law. And then through that process, we were institutionalizing it so that it runs through the very veins of whatever institution, our governmental institution, our educational system, our private sector inspiration, so that it becomes ingrained in just how we think daily, as if it's no big deal. And that's what's beginning to happen. And there is a price tag or a price or a cost to that. And we're going to be bearing that cost. And that is for this fundamental shift. Now, $4.4 trillion is a down payment for first year. Everybody's still kind of going to be in shock. It's going to take a while for it to sink in. It's going to take a while for people to figure out all the different ways that this single move will begin to impact the economy in terms of current contracts. Now, you combine that, and here's another interesting point. And I don't want to add on, but I mean, I'm just really excited about, these executive orders and, during the first 2 weeks of a new administration. But Biden issued the executive order to buy American. Now, what that means is before we've always had this theory, esoteric and aesthetic, and you see it on the commercials, American made, buy American and such. But, people were just like, oh, well, and the government would be like, okay, well, fine, we'll look at it. And in their procurement strategies, they would say, yeah, but then they might go to another contractor that had materials that were sourced outside the country. Well, with Biden's executive order on Buy American, it is a specific focus on American industry. Now, you take $4.4 trillion that says Buy Environmental, and then you add this one that says Buy American, and you know what you have? You have $4.4 trillion that says Buy American Environmental. So for the American environmental movement out there, where, if you're producing products or you have an idea and you can get it to market, the president of the United States has asked for you. It's funny. It's kind of like Uncle Sam wants you. Uncle Sam wants you and is willing to pay $4.4 trillion to buy American environmental. And the repercussions or the cascading effect or the ripple effect, whatever descriptive adjective you want to use to describe the impact of it, you can use it because it's going to ripple through and affect things. Now, I know that Paul had mentioned this, so he's going to be doing other videos, and that's going to be fantastic because you really do have to tease out each and every single component. I say 4.4 trillion, and that's to send the message that, hey, listen, we're in a brand new world. I say 4.4 trillion environmental, American environmental. We're in a new world. But what that means as you go down the supply chain, and I know here on this program, we've often talked about supply chain management. And when we talk about logistics in the supply chain and everything that goes into making a product and then delivering that product, you say, okay, we take all that stuff, we focus in and we make it a priority, make it environmentally self-sustaining or environmentally, not just friendly, but environmentally proactive, cheerleading, if I might use that word. And then you take that and you run it through the entire supply chain. And so from beginning in terms of concept and design and function, all the way through the components, all the way through the delivery system, all the way to the end user. That is a massive amount in terms of refocusing policy and institutionalizing it. So you do that and you say, hey, I want to focus on what I can buy here in America, and then boom, we're energizing our engineers, we're energizing all those people that are in the STEM areas, which gets right back to increased focus on our educational priorities, which is another way to institutionalize it. And these are the kinds of ripple effects. But then you get into industry, then you get into design, then you get into just about every facet of our society just with this one moment. And it's going to take time for people to kind of have it wash over them and then see how it goes through the system. But what I can tell you is this. The United States, and this is just a historical analogy, and it may not be completely on
Thank you.
Okay. Well, and that is this, that when the United States went to war in World War II, we suddenly changed our economy from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy, from production all the way through. And it took a year, it took like a year or two for the full weight of that consistent spending and policy change by the federal government to take full effect. But then by the end, by 42, 43, 44, 45, and 46, we had a fully militarized economy. So in 4 years, a lot can be done when the United States says, okay, we are going to change our economy. And the President of the United States invoking the Defense Production Act is no small matter, because he can change whole industries. And the last time that was effectively used in a kind of controversial worldwide war setting was World War II. And we're seeing that right now, but this time it's focused on the environment and the pandemic. Imagine the possibilities. So with that, I am very optimistic. You name it, it's on the table, and the president has said that this is what we're doing. And when now special
okay,
okay. Yes. I'm sorry, Dr. Sharif.
thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dr. Sharif.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
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 Yes.
Okay. Dr. Sharif?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. William. Actually, we are trying to share one of the fact from NASA, global climate change, and this is actually the real scenario of climate change. Like in 1950, it was in that level. Now, in current, this is increase. It's actually really, really challenging for us. Beside that, I want to know more, like how we can grow some, especially the youth community. I want to know from Professor Dev that how we can develop different kind of academic activities or skill development for the youth community, especially if we want to help them to understand about the climate change issue. Professor
The
Dev.
the chart that you're showing is the most terrifying chart that's ever been created by anyone, and that is, it shows that we are in an inexorable rise of carbon dioxide, and turning that around is a lifetime's work for the next generation. And so what I would like to do is use that chart as the incentive for the next generation to go, okay, we're going to move the needle. We're going to change that completely. If we look prehistorically, humans are the only the only species that doesn't recycle our own waste. We're the only one that leaves so much detritus around. If you look at any other creature, there's no waste stream that isn't recycled. But it's time for us to wake up and become like the other creatures on this planet, to learn to live in harmony with our environment. And that's what we need to do. We have to vote with our money. That's very important. And a child shall lead them is definitely our theme now, thanks to Greta Thunberg. So it's time for us to listen to the kids. And I don't teach kids, I teach families. So when we go into a school, the way our day is structured is not to get the kids excited, because they're easy. It's to get the kids, to get the parents excited. The two most powerful forces of humankind in the universe are the love of parents for their children and the awesome nagging power of those children. So my job is to mobilize those two things. So the way our day works in the Green Actioneers program, we start with the teachers meeting in the morning, and we get all the teachers excited about the potential of going green, the things that could happen. For instance, each of those teachers every few years buys a new automobile. Well, don't do that anymore. Instead, go on the used car market and buy a used electric car. Now, the reason I say that is that's what I drive. I drive a used electric car. It's really cheap. And the reason it's cheap is because people don't want a battery that only will take you 120 miles. They want the battery that will take you 300 miles. So we bought a Nissan Leaf, and it was 6 years old. And it only cost us about $6,000, which is a very small amount for a car in the United States. Meanwhile, its sister, the brand new Nissan Leaf, was $36,000. So if you look on the used car market and buy used cars, then you can get a really cheap electric car. And that's what you drive until the next generation gets rid of their electric cars, then step up and get a used Tesla. And because, oh, my Tesla only gets 200 miles. This new one gets 400 miles. Great. Sell it to Finnegan. I'll buy a used Tesla with 200 miles. So I think we have to deal with these two most powerful forces in the universe, the kids and the parents. And how do we do that is by education. I don't mean through the formal education system, because the last thing to change is curriculum. When I go to schools with my program, I don't talk to the district level. and I don't talk to the curriculum people because they're not on board yet. I talk to the principal and I talk to the PTA, the Parent Teachers Association, because they're ready to buy. Then once that school philosophy changes at the individual school level, then it changes at the district level. And once the district changes, then the state curriculum changes. And once the state curriculum changes, the national curriculum changes. So all of this discussion that starts from the top and goes to the bottom misses the way that change actually takes place. So our work, although it's great to speak at the top level, and it's great to work with the federal government, our work must be at the local level with individuals, with families, and so forth. Now, it's much harder because you have to replicate yourself over and over again. So what we're doing is within the Green Actioneers workbook, which I will always come back to, like a broken record, it explains how an individual school and an individual community can change the world, because it tells you step by step how to take the Green Actioneers workbook into your school, use it in the school, and then redound that to the benefit of the entire community, so that everything that you do in your home, then you talk about. It gets on TV, it gets on the radio, it becomes part of your internet conversations. And we build from there. We build it higher and higher and higher. So it's like building a pyramid. You don't start building the pyramid at the top. You start building a pyramid at the bottom. And that's what we're doing, is we're building a pyramid from the bottom up, starting with elementary school and middle school kids. Now, the reason we work with elementary and middle school kids is because they are able to bring their parents in the evening. Parents will go to school with their little kids. But high school parents, they only go to school if their kids are in sports or in trouble. Elementary school parents love to go with their kids to school and to work with their kids on projects. So our book and our program are all focused on building the pyramid from the base up. And that will help us because those parents get on social media, the kids get on social media, and the social media will help us to replicate this. Now, my fear is what happened with the Obama administration. Believe it or not, I was ready to roll out this program 12 years ago. When Obama first came in, I already had a program called Climate Change is Elementary. And we were going to elementary schools and talking about climate change. That program got quashed by the fact that there were so many people in every community who did not believe in climate change, that those people were able to prevent us from implementing the program widely. So I went back to the drawing boards and said, let's pull the term climate change out of the program and let's call the program Green Actioneers. And nowhere in the Green Actioneers workbook does it talk about climate change, because we don't want to scare them. And we don't want the opposition to go, oh, that book is preaching climate change. No, it's not. It's talking about a clean, green future. And the clean, green future is not only about climate change. It's about getting rid of pesticides. It's about reducing our use of plastic, maybe getting rid of it altogether. It's about all the changes that we need to make in our individual lives in order to be able to have a clean, green future. And whether it ignores climate change or glosses over it, I don't care, because that's a separate issue. What counts is what people do and what people tell other people that they are doing. And that's what's going to change the world. It's not because they're scared to death of climate change. It's because they bought a cheaper car, put solar panels on their roof, and put double insulated windows in, and put more insulation in their overhead, in their ceiling, in their attic, and that changed their electric bill. It reduced their electric bill by 75%. And now they're crowing about it. And they're on social media and they're telling their friends. And their friends are going to say, wow, how'd you save so much money? And that's what's going to change things. And yes, all the policy at the top and everything that Williams talked about is so important. But we've got to permeate the entire society with a new philosophy. And that new philosophy is all about living in harmony with each other and with nature. And we've got to just ignore the political side of this and get to work on getting individual families to go green. And those dads and moms in those families, they work somewhere. They work in a business, or they work in a bank, or they work in the government, and they're going to bring that philosophy with them. And that's how culture changes. I know from having watched it my entire 80-year life that culture does not change because of something somebody says at the top. It changes because of what people do at the bottom. And that's what we've got to do, is get to work on that. So drawdown is a great way to look at it, from the top down and at the middle. But Green Actioneers, going step by step, family by family, all over the planet, that's the way that we're going to solve this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor. Mr. Alex, you are developing a lot of projects, especially for homeless peoples and different things. So what kind of project we are observing from the NASA side, that actually climate change is real and every day, a lot of things happening. So we need to be careful about our activities and about the global warming and all of the initiative. But my question is that what's the small initiative we can take from our individual sides, and how we can change our ecosystem and we can solve climate change?
Thank you. So yeah, Kurt mentioned going vegan. We've talked about different solutions in here, and as has also what else has also been mentioned is drawdown. That lists just so many topics, and there is the 6 main categories, but there's a lot of subcategories, and it lists things in a systematic order with what you can do, what you can change, and how you can lower your individual carbon footprint so much. And yeah, I'm doing this project. It's about micro tiny homes for homeless people. I just distributed one yesterday to a guy that was in a car accident, broke his ribs, fractured his spine, brain surgery, twisted his ankles. He has nowhere to stay, so he's sleeping in my micro tiny home right now in the rain. So we've really just let people down, our society down, homeless. It's a humanitarian crisis because there's just not enough resources. So that project is something I'm doing. It's kind of like taking one step back to take 2 steps forward. It did take a lot of resources to use. I am buying sustainable certified lumber and recycled material, but hopefully it helps raise awareness of tiny homes and minimalism for the average consumer. So again, drawdown is a great source of information. The book that was just mentioned, Dave just mentioned, is also a great source. There's just a lot of information. I like just doing WikiHow, to recycle, WikiHow to plant trees. There's a lot of information there. NASA also has a whole section on their website that lists all the different steps. So I just made a couple notes, some things in the conversation that I wanted to touch upon, and it's just some important notes. So I'll just going to go through these really quick systematically. Paul mentioned social media and, maybe misinformation and all of that. And I do want to say we all have the option to report misinformation on Facebook. And it might not seem like a lot of change, but if we all start reporting the people that are saying, oh, it's fake, all the fake news and the misinformation. So thankfully, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Twitter and some of those, they now have teams dedicated to stopping misinformation. So there was a comment that someone left in here that climate change is a hoax, and we don't have time for that anymore. There's way too much disinformation and misinformation. That person is going to continue to mislead his family and friends, and then they're not going to be proactive. So we have to figure that out. Please visit Paul's YouTube channel. He has a lot of subscribers, a lot of good videos, a lot of good information that talks about climate change, and some of our solutions, sequestering carbon. We have talked about the 4-year cycle, and unfortunately there is a lot of corruption even in the United States. All of these Republicans that get paid off, by fossil fuel industry or whatever, it's bad. And so with one signature after a 4-year cycle, they can change and dismantle everything. And that, again, I want to amplify what Dr. Williams said. All of those electric vehicles will be bought, everything they spent their money on. The military budget is huge, and it has a huge environmental impact. So hopefully they're also switching the military over to more sustainable sources. Hopefully we get solar panels back on the White House, or different places through Washington, D.C. So Paul did mention stop cutting trees and planting and all that, fire prevention. I do just want to amplify what Paul said. So trees are carbon sequestration. So if we could break it down into categories, we need to stop cutting the trees that are already out there, that are holding carbon, producing oxygen and all that. We have to stop cutting down trees that are also we got to stop cutting them down. We have to plant new trees to replace the ones that we're cutting down. So there's those two categories: plant trees, stop cutting trees. And then there's fire prevention that he also mentioned. So we have to stop the trees from basically burning, releasing carbon, or dying, and the pine beetle spread and all of this. There's a lot of concerns. So trees, we have to protect them, protective areas. There's restorative projects and all of that. Paul might want to mention the chart above. It's a really good chart that we mentioned, or that was just brought up in this discussion. It's really informative, but it's kind of misleading because it's only showing that section. That's like a 50-year span, and it does show the drastic increase that's taking off exponentially, which is like trying to scare people. That's happening. It's scary. But if you look at the millions of years, there's been other climate related increases in temperatures. But what we're doing, it does show on that graph, is related to the Industrial Revolution and increase in burning fossil fuels and everything. But so what I'm trying to say is there has been different warming cycles before. So if you ever see another chart, you will see that it's fluctuated a lot more than that's on that graph. But what's happening right now is happening not one of the fastest times in history or whatever, and Paul can maybe explain that. But what's more alarming is there's more parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that haven't been this high. I think it's 4 million years or something. So what we've done to the atmosphere in such a short amount of time is just insane. And those repercussions and those negative consequences, Paul could again correct me, I think it takes 5 or 10 years before what's up there right now slowly starts affecting us. So we're just at a really scary point. And with what Biden's now doing with the money that he's directed towards all of this, again, with the sign of his pen, how he switches out everything, all of that money is, we need to just dump as much money and much resources into climate solutions as possible. If we would have done this 50 years ago, we could have done a smaller amount. It's taking off exponentially. Maybe 100 years ago we would have had to do $1, and then 80 years ago maybe $3, 60 years ago $9, 40 years ago. So it's taking off. Every year that we don't work towards solutions, that we're not dumping money towards it, it's going to cost us more money, and we're running out of time. So the last thing that I want to mention is, I don't usually disagree with people on these programs, but unfortunately, Dave, I'm not all about the the bottom up. I'm not about the top down. It's everything. I mean, I've been doing climate activism for 2 decades. I mean, yeah, we need everyone to be educated. We need it to be systemic. We need your book out there. It is important. But even if we did all of that, that's not going to change all the combustion engines in the White House with the sign of a pencil. So you're working on what you're working on. I congratulate you so much. Please, people watching, check out his website, support Dave. And then also all of the rest of, well, also a large portion of people voted to get Biden into office to do all this stuff he's doing. But it's not just Biden. It's not just politics. It's not just, your book and the families. It's also corporations, companies, businesses, even churches and other institutions. We all have to change. So bottom up, my opinion, bottom up, top down, this sector, that institution, that education system, everything. We got to change everything. And with the Biden administration, again, with the sign of his pen or whatever, it could change a lot of stuff fast because we don't have a lot of time. Your book, I'm sorry you got set back so long. I've also been discouraged from people by using the word climate change. Thankfully, our society is more accepting and we're not there anymore. We could talk about climate change. We could talk about the climate emergency and we're not as criticized. And the disinformation really slowed us down. And now we have work to do and we need to keep having discussions like this.
Let me have a minute to reinforce what Alex just said. I agree completely. We have to work on everything. And I want to go back to a time in my life when I was starting to work on a project, and the project was family planning in Korea and Taiwan. And I was working diligently to help my Korean and Taiwanese friends back in the 1960s create national family planning programs. I had a supervisor who was coming in from New York all the time to help us out, and I loved what he was doing. He was the regional director for population and family planning for East Asia. His name was Sam Keeney, and I was supposed to be working in the office and only working on one thing, and that was family planning. Well, I was pacing up and down in the office, and Sam was in there, and he said, "What are you pacing about?" I said, "Well, I'm so worried about the whales." I said, "I just found out that our friends here in Taiwan are killing whales, and that they're eating whales, and that we." He said, "Would you please sit down?" He said, "Take all the problems in the world and write each one of them on a fortune cookie slip, and put them in a trash can and pull one out. That's the one you're going to work on. And have faith that there are other people of goodwill who will pull out all those other slips of paper and they're going to work on their piece. Mm-hmm. And together, you will be able to solve all the problems. But if you try to solve all the problems yourself, you won't be able to do it. So pick your problem and work on that problem. And I've worked that way ever since. And we did reduce the average family size in Korea and Taiwan from 6 kids to 1.6 in a generation because of the work we did. And the work we did was starting with families at the village level, having women's clubs at the village level. Now, sure, the government was all in favor of this. And the government was providing the health services and providing the medical teams and so forth. But what we did was information, education, communication at the village level. And that's what I'm doing with the Green Actioneers program. I'm doing information, education, communication at the village level, because it's only when those villagers, which is the people who live in every neighborhood in the world, change, that the world is going to change. Because it really does take all of us doing everything. Now, there are other people who are going to be working at the macro level, and they're going to be doing things that I don't even understand and using data that I can't even comprehend. That's not important to me. What's important to me is that family, their kids, their carbon footprint, the money they can save, and how they can then build that up through the society. So it's everybody, it's all hands on deck. This is not a game. This is what we are going to do for the rest of the lives of the young people who are coming along today. The rest of their lives, they're going to be working on this problem. But they're not going to all be working on everything. They're going to be working on themselves and their families and their businesses and their communities and eventually their countries. And all politics is local. We have a vote coming up in our little town for members of the homeowners association. And I'm going to lobby like heck to make sure that
Awesome.
in the homeowners association in our town are green minded. Because at this point,
You should run. You need to get on that homeowners association.
Oh, that's not my job. See, that's somebody else's job. My job is to get the kids.
We need environmentalists running the homeowners association.
No, we need people to lobby the homeowners association who are environmentalists. Right. And that's the same thing. That's the mistake that we make over and over again. We think that the people who are really good at pulling oars should be running the ship. And that's not the way it works. They've got to keep pulling oars. I'm pulling an oar, and the oar I'm pulling is let's get the kids, teachers, and parents working on this first in the US and Canada, and then everywhere. And we do it, and I will hold it up again through the Green Actioneers workbook. And this is the index of things. There's 120 things that a family can do in order to go green. And it's in the Green Actioneers workbook, and it'll be on the Green Actioneers website eventually. Now, I don't have part of that $4.4 trillion. I don't have anything but what I've put into this myself. This is all self-funded. It's not a nonprofit. It's not a government program. It's Dave Finnegan's program to write a book and to go to schools and get people involved. We do a teachers meeting. We do classes for the kids. We have an assembly at the end of the day, and the parents come in the evening, and the kids and the parents work together to make a list of all the things they can do to go green. It sounds simple, and it sounds basic, and it sounds trivial, but that's how this is all going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Dev. Mr. Paul.
Sharif, hi. First, I think the mic is working now. First of all, Sharif, I want to thank you for for running this program. Maybe you could let I'm not clear on. You said you've done 200 episodes. Just curious over what time frame you've done that, and are you trying to run shows every single day, or once a week? Might be better in terms of building viewership. There can be too many that it just sort of swamps people. And thank you to all the panelists again. I always enjoy, learning. I always learn loads of different things from everybody and different ways of teaching. And I mean, my primary focus is on educating the public about abrupt climate change. Connecting the dots, analyzing the latest scientific papers and research that comes out, and actually going beyond them to say, to figure out how the climate system will act within the next few years and the next 5 years and decade and so on, based on, study of the past, the paleo records in the past, and we're always seeing new surprises in climate change. So I'm trying to anticipate what some of those surprises might be. For example, I'm pretty confident that when we lose the Arctic sea ice, right, it's pretty clear that the Arctic temperatures will skyrocket because, when you're melting snow or ice, the sea ice or on land ice, or the snow on the land too, it pegs the temperature at the melting point, right? Because the energy that's there goes into the latent heat of melting the ice. It doesn't go into heating up the air temperature. But when there's no ice anymore, then the air temperature can skyrocket. Like the example I like to give is, if you take the energy that is necessary to melt 1 kilogram of ice, then that same energy applied to the kilogram of water that results from the melted ice, that temperature would rise from the freezing point to 70 degrees Celsius, right? Of course, we're not going to get the surface of the ocean rising to those temperatures because of mixing with water underneath, etc. But it just shows that, the ice is necessary to keep the Arctic cool. And once there's no ice, the temperatures will skyrocket. The only ice left up in the Arctic will be Greenland, of course. The center of Greenland is about 73 degrees latitude north. Okay, so that will become the center of cold of the Arctic when there's no sea ice, as opposed to, when you have an ice-covered Arctic Ocean with Greenland, the center of cold is actually near the North Pole, but offset towards Greenland. And why this is important, the center of cold, it's where basically the jet stream's rotation is centered. So not only are we seeing the slowdown of the jet streams and the increased waviness and all the extreme weather events that are resulting, but we're seeing a big shift in the location. So instead of rotating about a center near the North Pole, that center of rotation for the jet stream, I believe, will be shifted south to be centered over Greenland. So that will have huge implications, of course, to all of humanity, and massive implications for global food production. Okay, so that's why I sort of harp back to that. So I try to look at I go beyond what the scientists are saying. I mean, I have to understand, the science as best as possible from what, papers I read and access, and try to explain them in layman's terms to the public in my video so that they're easily understandable. But I do much more than that. I go beyond I understand the science, and my background in physics and engineering and systems allows me to try to figure out, I use the analogy of chess, okay? So individual scientists are a piece on the chessboard. They're studying one very narrow topic, and I'm like the chess player. I try to look at all of the pieces and the components, in other words, the components of the climate system, and look at the interactions of them in order to try to get a picture of understanding of where we're heading, how quickly, what some of the ramifications will be, so that we don't have as many surprises, or so that I can anticipate some of the so-called surprises that we're seeing. So yeah, so thank you everybody again for having and for your great discussions. It's a great learning opportunity.
Hey, Paul. Sharif? Could I please ask Paul just about Earth wobble? Is that I've heard of the Earth wobbling because of the weight shift? As we talk about, have you done any research regarding that? Because you're looking at unforeseen issues or consequences in the future. Is that something that you've covered?
Yeah. So the Earth is massive, of course. In comparison to the weight of the ice at the poles. Right. But when you have a rotating object, a spinning object, the weight distribution is very important for the rotation speed. There's something called conservation of inertia. So what that means is that when we get massive melting of the Arctic of the ice on Greenland and Antarctica, then there's transfer of that weight at the poles, and that's locked up in the ice to be distributed across the planet in the oceans, right? That water goes into the ocean, and then ocean circulation distributes it. So there is a measurable effect on the rate of the Earth's rotation. It's very, very small. It's sort of on the order of microseconds change in the time for rotation, etc. And there is, the change in mass distribution can cause a slight wobbling, and we can measure those things quite accurately. So there's a lot of interactions between the climate parts of the climate system and the rest of the Earth system. So the wobble that you mentioned is one thing. It's very small, but it's detectable. The rotation rate of the Earth is changing. It's because of the mass distribution change, and it's detectable. There's also a lot of effects, like a lot of other interactions, for example. So imagine torrential rains in a region that has active volcanoes. So you get torrential rains on the side of a volcano that can cause a landslide on that volcano. And that landslide can cause a weakening of the structure that is holding, high pressure explosive gases inside. And so a torrential rain event can trigger a landslide, which could then trigger an eruption of a volcano, for example. We know that when there's rapid ice loss, we think about how the weight of that ice on the land. So roughly the density of ice is about a third the density of the soils and the land mass. So if we have 3 kilometers of ice on the land, then that weight of that ice will depress that land by 1 kilometer, a third of the because of the density the weight, the density difference being 1 to 3, that rate 1/3 for ice versus the density of the land. So, but that's over a long period of time. So, as we lose more and more ice, we can get this isostatic rebound occurring, and the quicker the ice goes, the quicker the rebound will be, and that can trigger, earthquakes that can be detected. For example, in Alaska, so-called ice quakes, or on Greenland. So there's all kinds of interactions between climate and the Earth systems, how they're changing, and changes to the actual planet itself. Most of these changes are fairly small and over long periods of time. I mean, we know how mountains are built up by continental drift causing collisions. For example, think of the Himalayas. It's very young, fairly young mountain range, so it's still extremely high. If you look at the Appalachians in the U.S., that was almost as high or as high as the Himalayas. Many millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, and now it's erosion has brought it right down to its present level. So there's lots of things happening, but you always have to keep in mind the magnitude of what's happening and the time scale over which it happens, right? Because in order to sort of worry about the things that need to be worried about, and keeping so it's perspective. In order to gain a perspective on how significant these events are, you need to always consider the time scale and the magnitude.
Mhm. Okay, thank you, Mr. Paul. Actually, I just want to share with you, like World Talent Economy Forum. Last 1 year of time, we are in online every week, 6 to 5, at least 5, minimum 5 program, maximum 6 program. We arranging the same time in our social media platform like YouTube, as well as our uh, uh, but beside that we done last 12 years of time. We done a lot of field work means we develop education groups. We have 100,000 students. Not only with the social media activities, we have lot of offline initiative, like for this carbon emissions and this kind of initiative. We are developing different kind of projects in developing nations. And for this World Talent Economy Forum, as we have strong collaborations in offline last 12 years of time, it's not a overnight only with the social media. I do not personally believe in that way, because we have to do last 12 years of time. We did lot of hard work, and we build up our corporation, especially on education industry. You can check world, like Cambrian Education Group is one of the largest education group in Bangladesh, and I'm one of the strategic player for them. This World Talent Economy Forums, we are taking this initiative. We are developing a collaboration in between developing nations as well as the developed nations, and already we have 300 speakers like you, those who join in World Talent Economy Forum. And I'm just sharing, like, already we have 5 million students from different developing nations from Asia Pacific. Just last week from India, 1 million student joins in World Talent Economy Forum. Our commitment to these students that we will distribute all of your contribution, like all of our content, 100% free to the all of the remote area. Even that in present world, internet also not available. 1.8 billion people from the developing nations, they are out from education systems. Real scenario is very, very difficult. It's not like USA, it's not like Singapore, even it's not like Malaysia, developing nation. Real scenario, because I am from the soil, I am from the real remote area, so I know that what's going on. Even we have student example from Nepal, from Himalaya, 3-4 thousand. They do not have even internet connections. So we, as much as possible, we are trying to distribute your contribution, like speakers contribution. We are arranging this and it's 100% free. Until today, everything actually, it's our sole funded. We do not have any NGO. We do not have government supports. Whatever I earn or we make, and we invest on our World Talent Economy forums. But yes, definitely we have to go for the fundraising and this kind of things, because of our target to reach 1 billion peoples and 100 million people in offline in between these years. So there are huge amount of people we know they are uh, outside of modern science, engineering, technology, and many things they do not know. So personally, I am also from a small place. So when I integrated with the first world, I can understand I have to learn a lot, and I have to change my life. So when I understand this point, I think that education is ultimately one and only way that we can change human lives. So maybe it's very common for USA that okay, they have a good school, they have good university, they have Ivy League university, but around the world there are hundreds of country. I'm sure that Professor Dave work with this overpopulation issues, and many project he is doing with NGO. So there are hundred of millions of people. It's untouched even in with these internet connections. So as we have contribution, we have a root level relationship. So we are distributing these things. Already we finished 200 episodes. This is 202 episodes. So hopefully in the future we will develop more contents. We will develop more meaningful, and I'm sure because in my personal life, when I develop academy, I find thousands of student life change. Now many of my students, they are employed in multinational company, they studying in Ivy League university, they are successful entrepreneurs. So ultimately it's my objective of my life, even our core team's objective, that education is ultimately the way of changing human lives. So your contributions will be massive. All of our speakers contribution will be massive when they it touch to the remote area people. And already we are observing some things. Even this April we have one of the largest conference with International Islamic University. It's called that Oxford, Muslim World Oxford. All of the Muslim leaders, even they study in International Islamic University. So we are launching SDG conference with the collaboration of Oxford University, because we need Muslim World Oxford, International Islamic University, because with the conference we can create more awareness in this ecosystem. We can connect with the more school, college, universities, and all of the peoples. So this is our objective. But for doing these things, only online is not enough. I have to do hard work last 12 years of time. Many countries I have to visit, many places I have to go. I have to learn from the first worlds, as well as I have to contribute for the developing nations. So I believe this is the ultimately way of changing human lives. So hopefully in the futures we will get more contribution from our speakers. Thank you. I'm just sharing our activities because everybody has right that what we are doing, how we are doing, and what is our objective. So we are developing step by step. Work is not finished yet. We are developing every day. Yes. If you have any kind of questions, even from audience, you can ask me. I'm ready to give this answer. No problem. So yes. Mr. Cart. Yes.
Question on
Oh,
the
you're
maintenance costs. Can you hear me? There was a good
Yeah. Go
question on the
ahead.
maintenance costs
Yes.
of electric vehicles, and they're much less. No oil changes to start, and in an internal combustion engine, there's over 2,000 moving parts in the drivetrain. In an electric vehicle drivetrain, there's only 18 moving parts. So no fuel pumps, no radiator, no transmission, none of those expensive repair costs. And the Tesla vehicles are being designed to last 1 million miles, um, which is just so important. Um, I talk about Tesla a lot because they're designing cars without what we call planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is where parts are designed to wear out, where cheap junk is made so that it breaks and you have to go back and repair it at a significant cost, or you just have to buy something entirely new. So they're not in every country, but hopefully we'll be seeing all the other auto manufacturers move towards that. Hey, design this thing to last. Use the best products, the best materials possible to make products. And this can go back to what Alex says. Alex talks about this all the time. Buy quality products. Buy steel. Buy stuff that's going to last. Um, I'm
When
excited
we
to see.
bought our Nissan Leaf, let me interject here because I want to follow up on this point. When we bought our Nissan Leaf, we drove it off the lot. As I said, it was a used car. The man who sold it to me was standing by the window. I rolled the window down and I said, when do you want us back for service? He said, you'll never need service. He said, we'll never see you again. That's why we hate these cars, because we don't make any money on service, maintenance, or repair. We only make money when we sell the car. And we sold you this car for so little, we're not going to make anything on it. So you got to understand, we are not in the electric car business yet. Well, I think that Tesla has changed the landscape completely, because dealerships are going to be out of business, because who needs a dealer when you can go buy the car on the internet and it never needs repair and it never needs service, never needs maintenance. All you have to do is change the tires. And it's a new world. And that's the problem. There's a lot of intransigence in the old world. There's a lot of things that have to change, and they will change because consumer demand will make it change.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic example. Thanks for jumping in there, Dave. And hopefully other companies are going to start to follow Tesla's lead. They're almost a $800 billion corporation in their market cap, and so people are taking notice. Consumers we're demanding products that last longer. We're tired of junk that's cheap but that breaks, a few months, a few years down the road. But we've got 10 minutes left. Does anyone else want to jump in on any topics?
Okay. Like, I want to give chance to Dr. William.
Oh, I appreciate that. I can't say enough. And Kurt, with Tesla as the example, 800 billion. I say, well, how about I quadruple that as a bet, 4.4 trillion. And so I say that facetiously, but also more important, just again to point out the scope and the size of the 4.4 trillion. That when we do think of examples where we can wrap our head around the amount of money, we can wrap our head around an $800 billion company. We kind of get that. But when I come to you and I start talking in trillions, not just 1 trillion, but a couple of trillion, and I say that it's really hard for us to wrap our head around. But we're going to be teasing that out, and certainly I look forward to all of Paul's videos that he does as he teases it out, and then through the supply chain. But I just can't be more excited, because I do want to point out that just the sea change around the world and for our audience around the world, and that is this. 9 days ago, we were still worried about riots, and we were worried about here in America whether or not we can actually just have a peaceful transfer of power. Okay, and now in 8 days, the new president has changed not only the dialogue, the attitude, but inspired hope through concrete action. Not action that we have to plead on, not action that we have to hold hands and protest at the White House on or anything else. He's actually done it, and now it's up to us, kind of like from the grassroots, to take that signal and then move ahead with our projects, to then move to see how we can implement the various ideas that have been on the table for decades. And so I'm just excited. I want the world to be excited. I want our audience to be excited, particularly the millions of students that are out there that are in research. Because, Sharif, as you know, the students that we reach across not only policy, they do, they're in science, they're in engineering, they're in all of the STEM areas, and they're out there, particularly in India, and Malaysia and Asia Pacific countries where they are capital rich with human resources. And they can develop the ideas. And to the extent that they develop the ideas and they know that one economy, which is the equivalent of at least seven or more than seven, has turned around and said, we're putting a bet on this. And it's for the near future. I'm excited. And we just have to wait and see. But I cannot underestimate when somebody says this is the direction we're going in. So it's really incumbent upon us. But I'm just excited, and I have to just take this personal point. When I watched the announcement live with President Biden talking about the initiative and the executive order, all I thought of was I couldn't wait for the day that we had this episode again, and I was able to say to Alex, I don't think that you necessarily have to stamp American dollars anymore, because I think the United States government just stamped their dollars. It'll stamp on it that says "Thank you" or whatever it is, because the American government has just offered you the biggest stamp that it could. And so I was waiting because I wanted to see your reaction. But go ahead, I'm done, Dr.
Yeah,
Smith.
that's good.
Yeah.
Good correlation.
Yes, thank you. I directly want to.
He froze up. Okay.
Yes, I want to start with Mr. Cart, then Mr. Paul, then Dr. William, then Mr. Alex, and finally Professor Dev. So, Mr. Cart.
Is there a question?
You're on mute.
Did you have a question, Sharif, or should I just go off on a random tangent?
I have to just say goodbye and thank you.
Oh, Dave has to take off.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm at a loss for words. Was there a question, Sharif?
No, actually, I just want to what's your concluding remarks for today?
Things. I was a little specific on trying to. I don't know. When I put a message up in the chat, can all the people that are listening and watching see the messages that I put up there?
It depends on what area.
Okay.
Two areas. Private chat and then public chat.
Okay. So maybe I'll share that next time. Sharif, I'm sorry. I kind of said what I came to say today, and yeah, I don't have a conclusion remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Your
mic.
Okay. Sheriff, are you muting and unmuting people?
Yes, because there are some echo.
Oh, okay.
Echo.
So yeah. So when you ask somebody to conclude, don't forget to unmute them. So yeah. Anyway, thank you again, Sharif, for explaining a bit more about the WTE forum and all of your work over the last 12 years, in other ways, and thanks for doing this, over the last year. And it's interesting, it's good for us to know as speakers that our voice is being amplified to many different people around the planet. And also thank you to all of the panelists, just wondering if you have an index of, like, if you've had 200 different 300 different speakers, if there's some index, and if you want to see a specific speaker, if you can see which videos they've appeared in or something. I don't know. That would be a lot of work maybe to do that, but it might be an interesting thing. Anyway, yeah, we just have to all keep plugging away at this climate crisis, and do what we can, and not expect that we'll have huge results or anything. But it's important that we all do that and try to maintain our own sense of optimism, right? Because that's very key to the work that we do. It can be very negative, right, at times, and it's mostly negative. So we have to find the positives and find the small wins that we make. So like the Biden 4.4 trillion. That's a a huge thing. So we're heading in the right directions with Biden, and it has been what, January 6th, we were wondering if democracy would continue in the U.S., right? And we had the inauguration. Unfortunately, it was not much. There wasn't unrest or anywhere in the country, which I think surprised a lot of people. And we have to move forward and do what we can to address climate change. And hopefully, maybe we've learned something from the way that nations have been dealing with the coronavirus. And it's all very good to have global supply chains, but when there's a crisis, for example, with vaccine availability or even personal protective equipment, access to masks and stuff, when they're in short supply in countries that are producing them, then the rest of the world, can be out of luck for a while, right? In getting supplies from places. So, so hopefully we learn lessons about this, and when and if, and I think it's a matter of time. Hopefully I'm wrong, but if we have global food shortages, we're going to see, these same sort of problems cropping up. So it's just something to figure out how we deal with them. At least, one of the things with global food supply that gives us a bit of a buffer is that, there's so much food wasted. 30, 40, 50% of food produced is actually wasted. It goes in garbage bins or recycling bins. And, when food prices are a lot higher, the waste should plummet, right? Food waste should really drop significantly when there's, food shortages. So anyway, it's a bit of a buffer. But anyway, thanks for doing these sessions. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, please
Thank you.
piggyback off that.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Paul, for your concluding remark. Thank you for going into detail about my question about the Earth wobble. So as Sharif mentioned, all the shows that have been produced, all the speakers, coincidentally and interestingly, just last night I was talking to someone about the show, trying to get them on the show. I think they've taken the climate reality courses. So they were they were looking at some of the old videos, and then they actually specifically mentioned you, and they said, how do I find more videos that Paul is in? And it was really cool. So your question is like very valid and important. So I think to solve this would be for Sharif to go back into the videos after they're produced on YouTube and enter keyword names into that video. So when they search your name, right, correct, in YouTube, it comes up under the keywords. I think that's a solution to that. Now, Paul, you also asked, well, how many videos are being produced? And Sharif mentioned 5 to 6 or whatever. So you're an expert on climatology. You're a scientist. We're on this show about climate change. But he's doing a lot of other shows to help just help our society, help our economy, help make the world a better place. Just off the top, we did actually a whole show on supply chain. And you were just discussing supply chain with the face masks. Recently, we did one about startups and businesses. There's some on industry and innovation, technology, AI, inequality, water. So he's doing a lot of wonderful shows. So he's trying to find experts in this field to go on this show, experts in that. So we, of course, we love your participation in this show. If you think you would like to participate in any other shows, of your areas of expertise, or if you know other people that might be good for the show, because if we continue to produce good content with you, with good speakers, we have a larger reach in other countries, because you can't have a large reach without good content. You can't have good content without a large reach. So hopefully you can continue to support his projects like I do. And then the last things that I would like to mention are, for those who are still watching, Google Earth is very scary when you zoom in and zoom out and looking at what's going on around the world, like Kurt mentioned. For those who say, oh, man hasn't impacted the Earth, there's no way humankind could change the atmosphere. Spend an hour on Google Earth, maybe even 20 minutes. Zoom in. You'll see we've changed everything. There's not a lot of places that humans haven't completely taken over, especially if you Google image search NASA satellite imagery, nighttime maps, or whatever, light pollution. We've taken over so much except for Antarctica. We are everywhere. So that's and then Earth's atmosphere or biosphere, what it's just such a thin layer around this planet that we've taken over most of the whole thing. So that's why we have to live in harmony with nature and lower our carbon footprint. And again, thank you, William, for mentioning Biden. That was exciting news about all of that money, and that's going to set a global example and have trickle down effects and systemically just change everything quick. So yeah, thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you, Mr. Alex, for supporting World Talent Economy Forum, as well as Dr. William and Mr. Paul. We have our scientific committee because we are arranging academic conference. Beside that, we have our analyst team, those who can help us to develop our organizations, as well as we need more advisors. So any point you want to contribute for World Talent Economy Forum, we are open, as well as I believe Dr. William and Mr. Alex also supporting World Talent Economy Forum initiative. Dr. William, what do you want to say? What the good news you have for this World Talent Economy Forums and for our audience?
Well, I'll just sum up it this way. I mean, the numbers speak for itself. That was my main point that I wanted to get across, because that says hope. But my excitement merely leads me to conclude with these words. For our environmental movement, buckle up, because I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. We have turned 20% of the economy, of the United States economy, and focused it directly on this path. And here in the United States, it's American environmental industry. So if it's been a nascent kind of group or effort so far, consider this triple steroid, because the focus of the United States federal government is on whatever it is that you've got, or whatever idea it is that you've got. And you've got a ready, willing, and able partner for the next 4 years. And this idea of institutionalizing it, it's not just getting the major institutions to adopt it as policy, and that in that regard, it's also us reacting and making sure. So when the government says this is the direction we want, we need more American products that are made that are environmentally conscious and fit our ecosystem, then we on the private sector have to adopt that and begin to supply that. Because once we know that there is a consistent supply and there's a consistent purchasing, it's a lot harder to disrupt that supply chain. And that's the way you institutionalize it. So the challenge is out. Well, there has been a need and a cry and a call for change. That the marker has been placed, and now we have to respond. And so I hope, and for the rest of the world, I suspect and I hope that your countries will follow suit. And when they do, all of you need to be ready. The cry has gone out, the marker has been set, and what can you do as a challenge? So I'm excited, and I'm just thankful. So with that, it's a bright day. We can argue around the edges, in other shows about who's doing what and whether or not that's important. But I'd rather have those arguments than what we've currently had the past 40 years.
Let's not argue over sports.
Yeah. Dr. Sharif.
Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. Hopefully the next week it will be more effective. We are coming. Any of our speakers has any good idea, good point that we can improve our content, we can improve our quality, we can do this kind of strategy for improvement the life of the youth community. That 60% of population actually live in Asia Pacific, and from there 57 to 58% actually youth in Asia Pacific. Most of the billions of people actually live in Asia Pacific, and many youth actually live in Asia Pacific. So I believe personally, not only believe, even in practical life, if you see that we can change human life through education, we can give them better life, we can give them better systems, and they will ultimately change their ecosystem. So that is the objective. So I believe your contribution will be very, very helpful for the youth community, for the people, those who actually change the this world. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. I want to give special thanks to Mr. Alex, Dr. William, as well as Mr. Paul, and those who joining today's sessions. And I want to give special thanks to our audience, those who always supporting me, always join with me, and always give us energy to do the better work, more work, because every day, last 1 year, every single day we work on World Talent Economic Forum projects. 5 to 6 days we developing content. Even we never stop. We never stop. We just move forward. It was not so easy. It's not so easy to continue any sessions, but your participation, the speakers participation, and the students participation actually give us new energy. So we want to bring more good news through World Talent Economy Forums, and definitely only education can change human life. We are working on it. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. It's really great session for our students.
It
Thank
was
you.
great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you.
Bye.